In this video, you're going to learn everything you need to know about underinsured motorist coverage, or UIM coverage. First, I'll explain what UIM coverage is. Then I'll explain how it's different from uninsured motorist coverage. And then finally, I'll explain how UIM coverage works as opposed to uninsured motorist coverage. Before we get into the video, a quick disclaimer: this video is not legal advice. It is for educational purposes only. If you've got a question about underinsured motorist coverage, talk to a lawyer in your state. Now, with that out of the way, let's get into the first topic of this video. What exactly is underinsured motorist coverage, or UIM coverage for short? Well, UIM coverage is a form of insurance that, like uninsured motorist coverage, may be bundled with your auto insurance policy. You have to pay an additional premium to get it, but it is in most cases well worth the additional premium that you'll have to pay. UIM coverage is different from the mandatory liability coverage that all drivers must have because it covers the harms and losses that you may experience as a result of an accident, whereas your liability insurance coverage covers the property damage and/or bodily injuries that you might actually cause to another driver if you are at fault in a wreck. UIM coverage exists because there are many drivers who, although they may have some form of auto insurance, they might just have the minimum policy limits required by law, which oftentimes are not enough to cover your full extent of damages in a bad accident. Underinsured motorist coverage is there to step in and pay for the remainder of your damages after you have spent all of the limits of the at-fault driver's liability coverage policy. So how exactly does UIM coverage work? Well, let's take an example here. Let's say you're injured in an accident caused by a driver who is only carrying the minimum required policy limits for bodily injury in Texas. That would be $30,000 per person or $60,000 per accident in Texas. But let's say that your damages from this accident were $100,000. Let's say your past medical expenses are $100,000, and maybe you are still treating your injuries, so those medical bills are only going to get larger and larger and greater. So you have $100,000 in medical expenses, but the driver who caused the accident, caused your injuries, only has $30,000 in bodily injury coverage. What do you do? Well, you would obviously first make a claim against the at-fault driver's insurance carrier, and you would ask them to pay the full amount of the policy limits of $30,000. That will reduce your outstanding medical bills down to $70,000. But what about the $70,000? Well, let's say that you have underinsured motorist coverage with a limit of $100,000. In that case, then the remainder of your medical expenses, that $70,000, it would be covered, it would be paid for out of your UIM policy. But let's say that you only have $50,000 underinsured motorist coverage policy limits. Well, in that situation, the $50,000 would be applied towards your medical bills, but you would still be left with $20,000 that you would have to either pay out of pocket or find another source of payment to pay that remaining $20,000. So the higher your policy limits of UIM coverage are, the more protection, the better it is for you. Now, one other thing, there are a few special rules that you'll want to remember when it comes to underinsured motorist coverage claims. Depending on the law in your state and the specific terms of your insurance policy, there may be certain steps that you must take before you can actually make a UIM claim with your insurance carrier. First, you must make sure to notify your insurance carrier, your UIM carrier, of the accident as soon as possible and that you might have a potential UIM claim at a future date. Then, more importantly, before you settle with the at-fault driver's insurance company, you want to make sure to get written and signed permission from your UIM carrier to accept that settlement offer from the at-fault driver's insurance policy. Before signing any kind of release from the at-fault driver's insurance company, you want to make sure you have a written permission from your UIM carrier to do that before you sign anything and turn it over or take any money from the at-fault driver's insurance carrier. And the reason for that is the UIM carrier has a right in many states to that money or to deny your UIM claim if you settle for less than the full amount of the policy limits from the at-fault driver. And so that is just something to do out of an abundance of caution. Make sure that before you accept any kind of settlement from the at-fault driver's insurance carrier, that you want to get your own UIM carrier's signed written permission from them if you plan on making a UIM claim under your own policy. So if you want to find out more about UIM coverage, then check out my other video on uninsured motorist coverage, where I also talk about how you can actually check your policy to see whether or not you have UIM coverage, and how much additional premiums you might be expected to pay if you want to add UIM coverage to an existing auto policy. If you like this video, let me know by giving it a like. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button below and click the bell notification icon. And of course, as always, thank you for watching.